Welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of FBC's The Table podcast. This season is titled Seeds of Eden, and will dive into practical Christian living and how anyone can make a difference in the lives of those around them. On today's episode, you will hear from Tanner Moore, Todd Warren, Sean Decker, and Ryan Froese. Thank you for joining us at The Table.
All right, man. Welcome back, everybody. Here we are.
Man.
Ready to rock again. And, we've introduced this series as practical Christian living, and we've spent, 2 hours of conversation now talking very theoretical, kind of Bible theology. And I hope that in this study is really where we start to turn a corner and we say, so then what do Christians do today? We've been talking about all of this in-between stuff. Right? In between the Eden that Jesus gave us access to and the Eden that we read about in Revelation 22. In between the pull of Babylon, the pull of sin, and the pull of grace and the pull of God, the pull of Eden. All of this in between. And so what do we do in the middle? And that's kind of where we're going. We got the same crew again, Ryan, Todd, Sean, back for round 3. And Sean, why don't you give us just maybe something that stood out to you over the first couple of episodes here, something you've taken away so far.
I guess what hit me really hard in the last episode was just the being pulled in two directions, that we as believers are called to be citizens of heaven where we are.
Yeah.
And we there is this pull to restore Eden to where we are and to bring the kingdom of God to our daily lives. But there is also a pull in Babylon and a pull to be a success and to in our own ways to hoard what is good and to make sure we provide and whatever that looks like. But I think we're going to hit on it some more, but and I think Todd sort of mentioned it in closing the last episode, that just that we are building a bridge between earth and heaven. But then I guess where I landed on that is, what might that look like with other people? People that don't know Eden yet.
People who live in Babylon.
Yeah.
And so up to this point, it's kind of sounded like, well, this is an easy solution. Just withdraw from Babylon. Duh. Right? Like up to this point, we've said, well, the place where we've experienced Eden is up on the telephone pole at the sunrise, away from all the people. And the place where we've experienced Eden is at church camp. So why not just move to church camp? Like, move to the mountains, move to the deer lease. I'm sure that you would love that. Move to the lake and, But there is also danger in isolating yourself and leaving Babylon, because then you don't build bridges with people who otherwise would have no access to Eden. And maybe in a way, if we did that, we would also be hoarding the good stuff of God.
Yeah.
Maybe it's possible for Christians to hoard the good gifts of God. And maybe one of the reasons we've been given good gifts from God, so that we can share them with people who have not experienced them yet. And that's going to be the focus for today, for this episode, is what does it mean to be a bridge? And what does an Eden gardener do when they find themselves living in Babylon? Let's start off in Genesis chapter 2, back to the creation of man. And we're just going to look here at one verse, Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. I want to think just for a brief moment about what humans are. According to the Bible, what is a human? Ryan, you read that one for us. Genesis 2, verse 7.
Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living being.
So humans are two things. What are they?
Dust.
Dust of the ground, so literally earth, and
The breath of God.
The breath of God, divine breath. And so So right from the beginning, the man was created to be something in between. Literally with one foot on earth and one foot in heaven. You know, if you think about it like that, right? Like part earthly and part spiritual, heavenly. And I think that we all can feel that and relate to that, right?
Absolutely.
That I've got like this earthly pull and this earthly nature, and I've also got this spiritual pull and spiritual nature. And I think that to neglect either of those things is wrong. Right? It is, I think it's popular, and maybe I'll let you guys speak to this a little bit. It's popular in evangelical circles to just say that all of that earthly piece of me is bad.
Yeah.
And only the spiritual piece of me is good. And in order for me to be who God wants me to be, I've got to be only the spirit and none of the body. That's not how God made us. What do you guys think about that? We're jumping into some heavy stuff right off the bat here. I know, but let's get into it. What do you think about that?
I think the first thing that it makes me think of, just because we're talking about, you know, God and earth, is like my upbringing is the first thing I think of. And we've talked about this at length, but just the idea of not being a part of the world, but kind of like being set apart. Does that make sense? But not just in a sense of like a spiritual sense, but also in like a physical sense where I'm gonna, I don't know, stay away from people that are not like me, I guess. Live on an island.
Yeah, isolate.
We isolate. We've talked about that before, because that's kind of like the mantra of the people that, the Mennonites. That's what they do. They isolate themselves and they don't want to be around. And that's,
which, for people who don't know, that's how you grew up.
Right.
Yeah, as part of the Mennonite faith.
And so one of the things that I think about being, and I didn't grow up like in the old colony church or anything like that. We grew up a little more modern, but there was still this idea of being isolated, and I was very sheltered growing up. And I will never forget going to a small group in college and realizing, like, you guys struggle with what I struggle with, like, for the first time. Like, never seeing that, because that's not something you do in the Mennonite culture. You don't talk about your struggles. You don't talk about what you're dealing with. Like, there's things that have happened in my family that I found out years later as an adult that people really close to me were going through, and I had no idea, because you just don't talk about it. You just don't do that. And so that was really eye-opening for me, being in a life group in Lubbock where I realized I'm not alone. I'm not going through these struggles by myself, that there's other Christians that are also struggling. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that was one of the first things I thought about, like, sharing your struggles is so powerful, because it helps others to realize, who are also going through the same thing, that you're not alone. And so, again, like, going back to what we talked about last episode, where you talked about how, like, maybe that's okay, that you're living in that tension. Like, that just resonates with me because of what I feel like I'm going through. You know what I mean?
It sounds to me like that isolation idea really stands out to you. That, you know, so here we have this idea of humans being part earth and part spirit. But to go all in on the spirit and none of the earth side is to neglect part of who God made us to be. Right? And now that's, you know, kind of the well, let me stop there. Did you guys have thoughts on that as we sit here, or because I'd like to explore that more? But
the only other thing, and I only make mention of this just because I've said things about the Mennonite culture on the podcast before, and I hope that people don't think then I'm just painting them in a negative light, because there's so many good things from my upbringing that I still, that are a big deal that I teach my own kids.
Sure.
But I just say that because I don't want that to just be a negative thing. But that is one of the things that was, to me, a negative thing growing up, is that isolationist attitude where I'm going to go live on an island with like-minded people who believe the same things that I do, and I'm not going to mess with anybody else. Because you know what? That's easier. It's easier to do that than to live amongst Babylon.
Well, and I think we can probably all relate to that in our own way. You know, I mean, I was raised in a very traditional Baptist family. Like, my grandfather was my pastor. My grandmother played the piano. My mom was my youth minister. My dad has been a deacon and has taught Sunday school for 50 years. You know, and so there's a lot of things I look back on with a lot of pride, right? And just like you do, the same, a lot of things that were instilled in you, you're very proud of, and what you were taught, and the same with me. But I think we can all agree that there are things as we became adults that we look back on, and now that I have my own kids, and that I'm doing a little differently than how I was raised, and that's okay. So I don't feel that from you. I never have.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I think there's so much about you and how you were raised that made you who you are as a dad, and as a coach, and as a leader in our church, and that kind of thing. So I think it's good.
I think to neglect the earth side is to, God's given us gifts and passions and things that we can do in the world on earth to, that aren't necessarily spiritual things. Some of those, that put us in positions to help bridge that gap.
That's right. I just think, like, you two guys love music. Is that wrong to love music?
And that we love more than just worship music or
you
Christian
love
music.
Creed and Matchbox 20.
Right,
but you guys, you love music, right? Yeah. And music is good. You, Ryan, you love a bunch of stuff. Conspiracy theories. But Ryan, you love just being curious. You love learning, right? And not just about the Bible.
Yeah.
You love learning about all kinds of stuff. Yeah. You make your own batteries, for crying out loud, because is that bad to love learning?
No, I don't think so.
Absolutely not. I had this crazy revelation. A mentor taught me this, and it's so simple because it's on the first page of the Bible. But he said, after God made the world, what did he say about it?
It's good.
The world is good. At least that's how God made it. Earth is good. It's supposed to be good. And God made things good. Like, mountains are good. And climbing mountains is good. And music is good. And learning is good. And reading books is good. And can we use these things to do bad? Sure.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's everything, though, right? Like, we can use the Bible to do bad if we want to. See the Crusades. Like, just because something is out there that's not, quote unquote, spiritual, or instead it's secular, I don't think that God makes that distinction. I think we make that distinction. Because when God made the earth, the physical creation, he said it was very good. And it's okay for me to think that the earth is very good. And I love athletics. I love sports. I can't get it out of my system. Right? I think that's good. I think it's good to love physical sport. Paul loved sports. He uses sports analogies all through the New Testament. I think he loved them too. Or I like to think that, it's good to be a part of the earth. We were made for that. But we weren't made to be all in on that. Just like we weren't made to be all in on the spiritual side either. I had this thought, and maybe we'll talk about it at some point, but we kept using the word isolate. And I said, in my head, I said, there's a difference between being isolated from Babylon and insulated from Babylon. And the reason we have the church is so that we insulate ourselves from Babylon, but we don't isolate ourselves from it. You see what I mean? Like,
Go a little deeper there.
in your house, you have insulation in the walls. The insulation keeps the cold air in and the hot air out. It keeps it consistent so that your AC isn't constantly running every minute of the day, right? So that you don't have to constantly be on guard and constant. And if you're not insulated, then you're running your air conditioner is just constantly going, and it's going to burn out, right? That's how it works whenever you live in Babylon. You can be, if you isolate yourself from Babylon, that would be like moving away from the heat and just moving to Alaska or the tundra of Canada. Well, yeah, it's going to be cold there, but it's also going to be terrible to live. Like, it's not going to be good, okay? So you can isolate yourself from the heat, or you could insulate yourself from the heat. You still live in the hot place, but you put things in between you and the heat so that it helps carry the burden of managing the heat, right? That insulation helps manage the burden of your AC. It's kind of like that in our walk with Jesus as well, and in our walk in Babylon, in our life on the earth. We don't want to isolate ourselves from Babylon because now we have neglected a piece of who we are, that we are part earthly, and we've eliminated the opportunity to be a bridge between Babylon and Eden if we do that. But if we don't insulate ourselves from Babylon, we'll turn into a Babylonian. And so what is that? What is the insulation in my life that keeps me from becoming a Babylonian, that keeps me cool, but that makes sure that my AC is not constantly running so that I don't burn out and give up and let the heat in, right? What's the insulation in my life? What's the insulation in your life? We don't want to be isolated, we want to be insulated. What do you think? What's the insulation for you? I feel a little bit like Joe right now because I'm using the I words and they sound alike. And so shout out to Joe if you're listening to the podcast. I don't know, but...
And I think, Sherry, if you could get that, if you can put that question up there, I think that's really good for people to see in a minute. It was, what is the insulation in my life that keeps me from being a Babylonian? And that's what you said, Tanner? That's really good. That's really good.
I've got, I think one of the ways is I've got some friends, a couple, who hold me accountable to those things and call out things in my life where maybe I'm not insulating myself from things of Babylon.
Yeah, so people.
People.
Other believers. Yeah. You know, this series is called Practical Christian Living Outside of Church, but that is not a means to say you don't need the church.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because I think, have we not, as a church before or in the past, been guilty of isolating ourselves as a church?
Absolutely.
I'm talking about Big C Church.
Right. Not First Baptist Seminole, but Christians.
Yeah.
And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
We have been guilty. Have we also been guilty of not insulating ourselves from Babylon and becoming Babylonians?
Yeah.
We've gone both ways, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And once again, we find ourselves in the tension of how do you live in the middle of that? Of being insulated from Babylon, that I don't become a Babylonian, but I also don't isolate myself from earth, where I'm so heavenly minded that I'm of no earthly good. Right?
Well, like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, we talked about that last episode, right? Like they were in Babylon, but they were still followers of God, and they still worshipped, and they did the right thing while they were still in captivity, while they were still in this place that was very much anti-God.
Yeah.
And so they weren't able to isolate themselves, but they weren't allowing themselves to become like everybody else as well. So there is a sweet spot there. But that doesn't mean it's
sweet
easy.
Spot is tense.
Yeah.
You telling me there's no tension inside that fiery furnace?
Bro, yeah.
Yeah. It's tense to be in that sweet spot. Just because it's a sweet spot doesn't mean it's an easy spot to be in.
But isn't that
Right.
where we do the most of our growing? Right?
What do you mean?
Well, like, I mean, and of course, I'm not a bodybuilder, as you can obviously see, but, it's when you're lifting weights or when you're working out, you're tearing down those muscles. But that's the only way that you're going to get stronger, right? That's the only way you're you're rebuilding what you just tore down.
Yeah.
And so I think that's just like when you were talking to Ryan earlier, that if you're in that spot of tension, then that usually means you're doing the right thing. And so maybe that's kind of the same thing. Like if we don't find ourselves working out our salvation or find ourselves wrestling
Love
with
that.
God,
Yeah.
then maybe are we growing? Or
Yeah.
are we maybe leaning more Babylonian?
Or ignoring like you brought up in past episodes, ignoring that Babylon that is in us by isolating ourselves, and now we're just complacent, and we're not stretching ourselves to be more Christ-like.
That's good.
I mean, it could go either way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because then you could be so isolated in your own Christianity that you're not reaching out to anyone else. Like it's,
Yeah.
We're hiding it under a bushel,
Yeah. Absolutely.
for lack of a better.
Yeah.
Yeah, it could go either way.
Go ahead, Ryan. What were you going to say?
This is kind of just an offshoot, but it
Never
made
mind
me-
then.
It,
I'm just, go ahead.
it made me think practically of my prayer life.
Okay.
There was a time in my life where I don't remember, I'll be honest, I don't remember where it came from, but just the idea to stop praying for the storm to go away. Like, stop praying to have a good day. And it immediately makes me think of the song Good Day, because my kids just absolutely love that song.
Yeah.
But that's not really that biblical. Because if you're living in the tension, like you said, you're like, faith is refined by fire. So sometimes God is allowing the storm there to make you better. And how often while we're going through the storm do we just ask God to take the storm away, instead of asking for God for the patience and the wisdom to make it through the storm? Like, what did the disciples immediately do whenever there was a storm raging around them? They're like, do you not care about us? Can you not, like,
Yeah, make it go
make
away.
this go
Right,
away?
yeah,
Make
yeah.
the storm go away. I wonder what would have happened if the disciples would have just not done that and just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, we could go a lot of directions here, and I think that they're all good. But I want to hit one last idea from this Genesis 2, and then maybe turn the corner and see where it takes us. But we opened up with the idea of that Eden is a mountain. And mountains are God-made, right? Check this out. Cities are man-made. But the job that God gives humans is to be a gardener. What are gardens? Are they man-made or God-made?
Are they both?
So let's talk about this for a little bit. I just spent the day yesterday out on my father-in-law's cotton farm, hunting Easter eggs and playing in sand dunes and letting the boys just basically everything but kill themselves and kill each other, because that's what they do at the farm, and they have a blast doing it, man. And but you look out at all of the different crops that my father-in-law tries to grow, and I look back there at Otis, and I think about the people in our world. I mean, we live in an agricultural community, right? Is the growth of the crops 100% in control of the gardener or the farmer? If it was, would there ever be a bad season? No. Now, check this out. But does it take everything you have as a farmer? Do you have to give it your all in order to grow a good crop? It takes everything you have, but it's not all the way inside your control. Who else has a part to play in that cotton plant growing or that fruit tree? Well, the weather, and the things that are outside of our control, right? But think about it like this. Ryan, you just built a house last year. But imagine that you bought all the materials for the house and you prepared the land. You cleared the mesquite and you leveled the ground and you got all the materials and you laid them out there in their place and all the conditions were perfect and you went home for the night and you came back in a week and you checked the progress to see how much it had grown. How much would your house have gotten built?
None.
You did all the work, right? You put all the things in place, but a garden, Amber Gardens, yeah,
yeah,
you can do that, right? Prepare the ground, put all the things in place, give it the water, leave for a week, come back, and the plant is many times bigger than it was when you left. Who made it grow?
Not the gardener.
Not the gardener. But did it take the gardener?
Yeah.
Mountains are God-made, cities are man-made, but gardens are a partnership. It takes both. See, God made life, right? Like God made plants. And in a way, we're counting on the life cycle of that plant. Right? We're counting on the resources that God gives. We're counting on the rain that he gives. And we're counting on the soil conditions. And we can do our best to control as much of that as possible. But we can't control all of it. And at the end of the day, we never can make the plant actually grow. We can just give it the right conditions to grow. Right? But God made that plant capable of growing. But it still takes everything I got to grow it. But I'm not making it grow. So to be a gardener is to give everything I have, knowing that the outcome is not totally inside of my control, but that I'm joining into a partnership with someone who can control the outcome. And just because it's not within my control doesn't mean it doesn't require everything I have. I still got to give it my all, but I've got to trust that there's someone else out there who's better or stronger than me who can join with me. And that's the job that God gave humans, to be a gardener. And I wonder if that's not the job that we still have today, to be in partnership with God. Right? Not to go all off on our own and build the city. Not to climb the mountain and isolate, but to partner, to cultivate, to be both of the earth and partnered with the one of heaven, and to plant. So what does that look like? So what does it look like? Well, in the story, the Hebrews are carried off into exile in Babylon, right? They literally are taken to Babylon. And Jeremiah the prophet writes a letter to the Hebrew people who are living in Babylon. And I think that this letter asks the question of, what do you do when you're an Eden person but you live in Babylon? What does it mean to garden in the city?
That's good.
So here is the gist of Jeremiah's letter, and we're not going to get to verse 11 yet. And you know what? I got to quit making jokes, like just altogether, because I've made so many jokes in my time here of Jeremiah 29:11, and now it's like people will look at me and say, I know you hate this verse, and I'm like, no, I don't hate this verse. I hate the way that so many people abuse this verse. I hate the way that people don't understand it, because I think this verse is so rich. And there's so much beauty here when you know the context of the verse. I hate the fact that you don't know what this verse means. I don't hate this verse. And so, anyway. Yeah,
keep your plaque on your wall at home. It's good.
It is good. It's good, okay?
So don't go throw it in the fire.
There's just a little more tension there than you think.
That's right.
Okay. Jeremiah 29. Would Sean, why don't you read this time? Go verse 4 through 9.
All right. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of Israel, says to all the captives he has exiled to Babylon from Jerusalem. Build homes and plan to stay. Plant gardens and eat the food they produce. Marry and have children. Then find spouses for them so that you may have many grandchildren. Multiply. Do not dwindle away. And work for the peace and prosperity of the city where I sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine your welfare. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of Israel, says. Do not let your prophets and fortune tellers who are with you in the land of Babylon trick you. Do not listen to their dreams, because they are telling you lies in my name. I have not sent them, says the Lord. You said through 10? Or
through 9 right there.
All right.
All right. Did you just say that Jeremiah, the prophet of God, told the people of Israel to pray for the welfare of Babylon?
Yeah, that's what it said.
This is the Babylon with the king called Nebuchadnezzar, who made the image and threatened to throw anybody in the fiery furnace who didn't worship it. And that's the city that Jeremiah tells the people of Israel to pray for its welfare. Make that make sense for me. You're telling me they're supposed to root for Babylon. They're supposed to ask God to bless Babylon.
How though? Like how? What is the blessing?
Yeah, what is the blessing? He doesn't tell us specifically. So what does Jeremiah want them? For when it prospers, you too will prosper.
Yeah, mine said its welfare will determine your welfare.
So what is the welfare of Babylon?
Well, if you think about originally Babylon, like what they were doing was destroying themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So if they were destroying themselves by their, whatever ideals, kind of like what we've talked about, like you being your own God. If you're praying for their welfare and you're trying to basically prosper Babylon, what is that?
Yeah.
Is that not bringing Babylon back to Eden? Being the bridge?
Yeah. Being a bridge.
Being a bridge,
Yeah. Let's keep digging into that. Garden pun intended. Let's go a little bit further. Well, first of all, here are a few things Jeremiah did not say. He did not say, form your own community on the outskirts of town. Don't talk to anybody. Don't engage. Make sure you stay pure. Remain faithful. And do not participate with that city. He did not say to do that. He also did not say, just go ahead and be full-fledged Babylonian. He did not say assimilate. He said, enjoy yourself, right? Have families, multiply. He said, plant gardens, build houses, become members of the community, and pray for the welfare and the prosperity of the city. So become a part of the city, but don't become assimilated to the culture of the city. That's tense. How do you do that? What does that look like? What are they supposed to be praying for, and what are their lives supposed to look like? Eden people in Babylon.
That's the key to how we should live.
What do you mean?
Whatever the answer is, that's exactly what we're supposed to do.
So we need to find this answer because that's what we're supposed to be doing too. I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm just looking at, I think Ryan said it a second ago, but seek the welfare of the city. And it's like, well, what's the welfare of the city?
Yeah.
Pray for the welfare of the city. What is it?
That's the question. Yeah. What is it? What does that mean? to pray for the well-being of the city, to become a member of the community. It says build a house. You don't build a house unless you're planning on
staying for a while.
and embedding yourself into a community, right?
Well, in mine, I think mine said plan to stay. Yeah, build homes, plan to stay.
Yep. And so check this out. Here's where we get to verse 11. You ready? This is what Jeremiah tells them, verse 10, is that, look, you're going to be in Babylon for 70 years. You people that I'm writing this letter to, you're going to die in Babylon. You're not coming back home. Don't listen to the prophet saying that this is only for a short period of time, because it's not. Now, God knows the plans that he has for you. And the you there is plural to the nation of Israel and to the future generations of Israel. So that you is basically to people who haven't been born yet. Check this out. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. They're plans to prosper you, to be good to you, not to harm you, to give you hope in a future. It's like what we've been given. That promise of Eden restored in Revelation 22. Jeremiah 29:11 for the Israelites is the same as Revelation 22 for the Christian. God says, I know what I have in store for you and for the future, but you people better get comfortable in Babylon right now, because you're not going to experience the plan that I ultimately have. And I don't know, maybe Jesus will come back in my lifetime, but I've basically given up on that and saying if he comes back, great, that's awesome. But I don't know that I'm going to experience that. And that's okay. I think I'm going to live my life in Babylon. And I know the plans that God has for this place, for this earth. He told me about them. Revelation 22, right? Habakkuk 2:14. For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the seas. I know that that's what God has in store for this earth. I don't know if I'm going to live to see it. I better get real comfortable with Jeremiah 29:4-9 in the hope that verse 11 is coming. But that doesn't mean that I should stop and just wait for 11 to get here and forget about verses 4-9. So what does it look like to become a member of the community, to infiltrate the Babylon, to try to make it prosper and be good, yet remain an Eden planter? What does it look like? And I'm talking real practical here.
The Mennonites must have been reading this verse to reproduce.
Oh, I was like, I'm not going to go there.
Have lots of kids.
I'll let okay.
So I think about our campaign this year, for lack of a better word, that as a church that we have decided to be for Seminole.
Yeah.
Like that's our motto for the year. It's everywhere. It's on our shirts. It's on our sign. Whatever, like that. Thinking about looking at the way we live through the lens of being for Seminole, and I think the whole idea behind that is that so other people, let's call it Babylon, people that don't know Jesus would see us living differently.
So what do you do when you're for Seminole?
I think you're about the welfare of your city.
And in what ways would it be good for, like what are some things that would bring welfare to our city? What are some things that we've decided we're going to do to bring the welfare to Seminole? You know?
Yeah, I mean,
what are they?
Just real simply, practically, is community rehab.
Yeah,
doing things for people without asking for anything in return.
So, let's pause there for a second. We're going to rebuild people's houses.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is that going to be good for our city?
Absolutely.
Yes. is that going to be good for somebody who's living in that house that now has a house that's not falling apart?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you're telling me that that is a Jesus thing to do? To rebuild somebody's house?
Well, yeah,
Yes.
and Jesus also met needs. It wasn't just,
Well,
oh,
that's-
here's your ticket to heaven.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. That,
To rebuild somebody's house.
Yeah.
That's a Jesus thing to do.
yeah.
Right?
And that also takes sacrificing your time, which is something you never get back
That's a good point.
in a society where you're so busy.
That's a good point.
And
yeah.
you don't have enough time as it is, it feels like, all the time. And so sacrificing your time for a day or whatever, like, to me, is a big deal.
Yeah.
Well, and I think
Let's keep going.
to even
Yeah.
take that further, I know for a fact that Joe has met with pretty much every major leader of our community.
Yeah.
Whether it's through the school system or the hospital board or the mayor or the judges in our town. Like he's literally gone around and had meetings with these folks and he asked them, how can we help you?
Yep.
And I think they've been kind of taken aback by it. Like,
Right.
like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
What do you mean how can you help us? You mean you want to do that? And I don't think it's not even like this big grand, well, we need to raise $18 million or whatever. It's not that. I think it is simple things. It's, when someone, in our city leadership or a paramedic or a firefighter does something, we celebrate that on social media. It has zero to do with our church.
Yeah.
It's nothing like that. But we're saying we believe in where we live. We believe in the people here. We want to celebrate them.
That's right.
And so I think it is very practical, and I think
It is.
I think we try to make it harder than it is.
And that's the whole point of our series is to come to that right there, right? That it doesn't have to be as I don't want to use this word but I'm going to use it anyway. But I'm not anti-church. Please, nobody listening to hear me say that. I'm at church every Sunday, and I believe in insulating myself.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be so churchy, right? In order to be serving Jesus. You don't have to be churchy to live for Jesus. I'm not saying you don't have to go to church.
Right.
That would be a bad mistake. I'm saying that it doesn't have to have a praise concert attached to it, like you said. It can be celebrating a good thing that somebody did. Let's keep going, though. Let's keep going.
Yeah, so when I read, build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat of their produce, take wives and multiply, it says do not decrease in number. I think of planting yourself and then growing roots and bearing fruit and those desires and those passions that we talked about earlier, those earthly desires and passions that God has given us. Just
run with them.
Run with them. And,
Yes.
and like
That's good.
God's put you in a basketball gym.
That's right.
And use it.
And I love it.
Right.
Yeah, but be good at it.
Yeah.
Like give it everything you have. Like a farmer would give to his crop, hoping that God will come through on the other side and make the plant grow.
Yeah.
You give that thing that God has put in your heart everything you have also. Right? Like, this is going to sound crazy. I know. And this, I don't know, maybe somebody just ruffle a feather or something. But like, mow your grass. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm talking to myself. Seriously.
What about for those of us that don't have grass?
Well, then I guess you just can't be a full...
Could we mow our neighbor's grass?
And mow your neighbor's grass, yeah. But like seriously, like mow your grass and make your yard look good.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you have to look good to serve Jesus. I'm saying like make it beautiful. You know, make it beautiful. Make someone else's yard beautiful. Mow somebody else's grass. Make it something to be proud of. Make someone else's yard something that they're like, yeah, that's my house. Right? Make someone, empower somebody, encourage somebody, help somebody believe in themselves. I'm Sorry, I set my phone down there, but checking the time, and I know that we're running low and we've got to land our plane eventually, but
we'll just make it into 2 episodes. It's fine.
Okay. Well, then we'll just keep on going. We'll just cut it and keep going. And, you know, and I really don't want to give just a ton of like, well, this is how I do this in my life, because I don't want to make this about me. I want this to be about us, and I want it to be about our church, and I want it to be about our listeners, and about growing with Jesus. But I've got this group of kids that I work with. I'm a public school teacher. I'm a basketball coach, right? And I believe that I'm planting seeds of Eden. Mm-hmm. And rarely do I preach the gospel. Yeah. In fact, almost never. Mm-hmm. It's illegal for me to do it. And so I feel like I'm planting Eden seeds by challenging students to grow, by pushing them to be better versions of themselves, by trying to empower them and equip them with tools to create the lives that will be good for them, right? And I take that very seriously, and I try that every day. And I've got this group of kids that's kind of disenfranchised. They're a group that's difficult, for lack of a better term. There's this one boy in particular, and I'll, try to protect his, some of the stuff, but he immigrated from Mexico. Has 4 siblings. 2 of them have been murdered. One of them is the reason the other 2 are murdered, and lives on the property, but drugged out. His dad was in an explosion in the oil field, and so is all but brain dead. It's kind of like the mentality of a 3-year-old. So mom takes care of dad, and mom takes dad to the doctor, and by the time she gets done, then she gets home, takes the boy to school. He misses first period every day, and he has math first period. Okay, and we're sending him to detention because he isn't passing his math test, right? Mm-hmm. And like, this kid has 0, like, that's the last thing on his radar is passing that math test first period. There's a reason. The reason he's not coming to school first period, right? Yeah. And it has nothing to do with the fact that he's being lazy, or even though he is struggles with laziness and a lot of things, right, that people without guidance would deal with. So here's this kid who I really fell in love with, and kind of made it my mission that I'm just going to try and make this guy feel something positive about himself, right? And so one day he's just really struggling, and he's kind of talking down on himself, which is very common for him, and he's really difficult to get to. I mean, he's got all kinds of walls that he puts up, and I mean, understandably so. Sure. After hearing that story, and he's just talking about how he's just ready to drop out. He's done with school, and I just stopped him and I said, man, you have no idea how tough you are. And he I said, the fact that you're even here is incredible. I said, do you know how awesome it is that you showed up to school? And he kind of looked at me. I said, I said, you're 14 years old, and most people couldn't even handle one of the things you've been through. And you've been through all of this, and you came to, I know you didn't pass your math test, but you're here. And dude, I want you to know that I think that's awesome that you showed up. And, he kind of, man, he sat up, and he said to me, I've never thought about that before. I guess that is pretty good. It's like he hadn't been told in years that he was doing something good. And so I wrote him a letter, coming into his, because he wasn't going to be in my class this year. So I wrote him a letter, and I left it in his schedule. He doesn't show up to school. In fact, he doesn't show up to school for a month and a half. The only reason he ends up coming to school is because he gets arrested, put on probation. He's got a lot of things working against him, and he makes a lot of poor choices, this kid. But he gets to school, and he gets the letter that I wrote him from 2 months prior. And he ends up in our alternative placement campus, and I go visit him one day, and he mentions that letter that I wrote him. I mean, it was a little note card, no bigger than this piece of paper you got, and probably 2 paragraphs. And he said to me, I read that letter every day. He said it's just so nice to know that there's still somebody out there who believes in me. So because I don't hear words like that very often. Now, I'm not telling that story to like brag on myself or say that I'm doing a great job. I'm just saying that, like, okay, I haven't preached a sermon to this person, not a single time. But that's not the point. The point is, I just want him to feel good about himself. Not in the way of like what we've said in here, like, just live your truth and you do whatever's best for you.
Right.
Not in that way. I mean, like, in the way of, I want you to know that I believe in you and that I'm in your corner and that I'm rooting for you and I think you can make it. I think you can do it. And that he knows that there's somebody in this world who knows that I could make it and I could be it and I could get out of this situation and I could go the next step. That's planting a seed of Eden, to just decide that, man, I'm just going to encourage somebody today. I'm just going to take somebody who's down on their luck and I'm just going to try and make them believe in themselves. That is a godly Christian thing to do. And it doesn't have to be a sermon.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a praise and worship song. It can just be a pat on the back and a hug and a, man, I believe in you. I think you're awesome for doing what you've done so far, right?
Yeah.
And that's the point of this study, and the point of what I want us to get to is that there are so many ways that I think even we miss and ignore that we can serve Jesus, and that we can be that bridge between heaven and earth and try to bring those two places together and be who we were created to be in the earth, but to be heavenly, and to be both at the same time. And it's tense and it's hard, and you get your heart broken when you do that. And sometimes the Babylons crush you, and people take advantage of you, and and you get pulled into Babylon because it's so much easier to be a Babylonian. And you get pulled into isolation because it's so much easier, because it's so much less heartache and it's so much less trouble to just isolate yourself. But to live in that tension with one hand on each side, and to say, I'm going to stand right here in the middle, and I'm going to pull these two places together somehow, some way, to create peace right here where I'm at. Whew, and that's a lot of talking for me. I'm kind of dominating this part of the conversation, but my last little question to wrap up this little piece of what I'm saying is, so in what way have you gardened the little piece of Babylon that God has entrusted to you? The little piece of Babylon that you live in. How does it look more like Eden because you're in it? And that's the question, right? I find myself saying that a lot. There's a bunch of that's the questions, but that's a good question. How does the little piece of Babylon that God has entrusted to me look more like Eden because I'm living in it? Right? Let me step back for a second. You guys, thoughts, questions, comments before we close this thing up?
I just go back to the Cain and Abel story where we talked about our sacrifice. It's kind of the same concept. Every one of us has situations like that we can make an impact. And if you think about gardening, if you neglect the garden, what happens to the seed?
Yeah,
it dies.
Yep, weeds choke it out. Doesn't get the nutrients it needs.
Yeah.
It takes everything you got.
Yeah, it does. And so you can't just not do anything.
Absolutely.
And maybe everybody's role in the garden is a little different. You know, not all of us are going to be in a classroom with, a teen leadership class or whatever.
Right. No, that's what Todd was saying earlier.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
But you have situations in your life wherever you're working, wherever you're at, whether, like my wife at home with 5 kids.
That's right.
And I can guarantee you one thing, my job is way easier than hers. I've been home for almost 4, or not home, we went to the lake and stuff this weekend. but I was with my 5 kids for 4 days in a row. I'll tell you what, my job is a lot easier than that.
Yeah.
So wherever you are,
Yeah.
whatever you're doing, those situations come up, and you gotta water or whatever whatever you're supposed to do to the best of your abilities. That way the seed can grow.
And ultimately, you don't get to control if it grows or not.
Yeah.
And boy, that's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
That's tough
Yeah.
to just say,
Yeah.
I'm going to give it my all, whether the results work out the way I want them or
Yeah.
not.
Yeah.
Because to obey is better than the outcome. Go ahead.
When I think about people who are listening to this, like I've had a lot of people that let me know that last season really meant a lot to them, and that they were challenged and they've grown, and Garrison has looked, and we can see that people literally across the country are
Wow.
tuning in.
Yeah.
And the beauty of that is that everybody's Babylon looks different.
That's right. But in a way, they have so many similarities.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're all in the same fight, but in a different
Right.
piece of it.
And the fact is that everybody around this table, Otis and Sherry, whoever's listening, whatever that looks like, everybody has their own way, but also their own mission
Yeah.
to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
And it looks different than what mine looks like. I think back when, as an example, you were on staff with us for a little bit.
Yeah.
And then when you got the head coaching job, then you decided that you just couldn't do both, and I get that.
Right.
But the fact is, and people would ask you all the time, man, why don't you just come and be on staff? Why don't you just come and work for the church full time? And you would say that is my mission.
Yeah.
That is my calling. That is, and I think that's the deal, that everybody has a way that they can make an impact in what they're doing. It doesn't have to be in the pulpit on Sunday.
Right.
I mean, there's a place for that, and we need that.
We need it.
There's the insulation, right? We need that time together.
Yes.
But we're so much better together than we are by ourselves.
Yeah.
I guess there's that isolation versus
Right.
insulation, right?
Right.
And I don't know. I just think that's really powerful. Thinking about whoever's listening to this, that whatever you're doing. If you're a stay-at-home mom, or if you work in the oil field, or if you're a teacher or a coach, or if you're a doctor or a nurse, or if you're a farmer, like everybody has a role
Yep.
to play here.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right where you are.
Yeah.
Right. Like, quit looking somewhere else. Quit looking outside to, like look right outside your front door.
Yeah.
And that's where we're talking about garden. Garden right there, right in your flower bed.
Yeah.
You know.
And it is practical.
Yeah.
Like we try to make it so big or so unattainable. Like we can't change the world. How could we ever do that? How could we ever bring Babylon to Eden? But man, the story of that young man, like those are seeds of Eden planted in his life.
Right.
And it might have seemed inconsequential. You wrote him a note. But that's what that is. Right? And so everybody can do things like that. It's simple. But what are we doing?
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say I've spent 10 years in the same setting that you guys are in. And, it seems like there may have been more opportunities, in day-to-day things, just when thinking about it. But like, just this past week, I had one of the guys that I work with that I don't even work with him. We were just at lunch together. And we started talking at the end of, just before we went back to where we were going. And he was pretty vulnerable with me about, his marriage and some difficulties they're going through in it. And I just had an opportunity to just to pray with him about it right there and let him know that I was going to continue to do so. And I think one of the misconceptions that I had maybe in getting into this new role was that those opportunities for influence or purpose or meaning would dissipate with leaving that area that I was in, and it's not, but it's like you said, it's for anybody anywhere, because we're all living in a world that's torn.
That's right.
That's right.
Yeah, and purpose doesn't come from a setting, from a somewhere. It comes from a someone.
Sure.
And if you're somebody who lives on purpose, you're going to live on purpose wherever your setting is, right?
Yeah.
And so you lived with purpose as a teacher, you're still going to live with purpose in the oil field.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's a someone, it's not a somewhere.
Right.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love that. You know, and kind of like what you were talking about, Sean, where it's like, man, everybody could do something. I had this thought. I was mowing my grass on Friday, and I said, you know, if we all just lived the way, like okay, all of us either are or have been at some point responsible for a teenager or multiple teenagers. If we just lived the way we try to get our teenagers that we're responsible for to live, do that. Right? Do that. So think before you speak. Right? That's good advice we tell our teenagers. Like, how about you as an adult? How about me? Do that. Right? Do your best. Don't quit when things get hard. Do your best. How about us as adults? How about us do that? Right? Like, quit worrying so much about what people think about you, and do what's right. Think about all the things that we say are like, be kind to people. Right? Like, whatever advice you're giving to your teenager, just do that, and that's probably a good place to start.
That's good.
Right? That's probably a good place to start.
Yeah.
That's not just advice for kids. That's for grown-ups too.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Closing comments or remarks here? So we're gonna keep digging into this, and we're gonna keep asking those really practical. I mean, I'm talking like, I want specifics. What does it look like to garden your little piece of Babylon? What can you do in the church, outside of the church? What does it look like to give unreasonable grace to people? What does it look like to suffer on behalf of others so that they can have life? What does it look like to encourage and empower people to create prosperity for themselves and their family? Like, what does it look like to bless other people and to be a bridge between heaven and earth? And fair warning, this is a place of tension. It's a place of heartbreak. It's a place that's difficult. Sometimes you get burned. Sometimes people take advantage of you, and it's hard. It's hard. But just because it's hard doesn't mean it's bad.
Yeah. Because
this place in the middle, in between, the place where, gardening is a job that gets your hands dirty. And if you want to be a gardener, you gotta get dirty. You can't do it and stay clean, right? Like, how do you just get in the middle of it and dig in the dirt and sometimes get poked by a sticker, but say, I'm gonna plant this seed anyway, and I'm gonna water it, and maybe a drought comes and it doesn't grow, but maybe it does. But maybe it does. And I'm gonna trust God to do what He does in His time, knowing that one day He's gonna make it all right. But in the meantime, there's a lot of work to do, and I can do a little bit of that work. Cool, guys. Thanks.
It's good.
It's good. Really good.
Thanks for listening to FBC Seminoles, The Table Podcast. A new episode will be released each Monday. We invite you to pull up a chair and join our table each week as we dig into God's Word together. We would love for you to join one of our Connect groups that meets throughout the week and worship with us on Sunday mornings at 9 or 10:30. If you'd like more information, you can call our church office at 432-758-3291 or visit our website at fbcseminole.org.